Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa, France 24's program focused on the continent. I'm Charlie James, and these are the headlines. South Africa's finance minister resigns. Nhlanhla Nene quit over undisclosed meetings with the Gupta family who are at the heart of a corruption probe in the country. A joint UN and African Union mission is in South Sudan, there to encourage progress on last month's peace agreement and promote the inclusion of women in leadership. And Senegal's tech scene is teeming with young talent, but seed money hasn't kept up with the boom. We look at how investment firms are starting to dip into Senegalese startups. We begin in South Africa, where the nation's finance minister has been caught up in a corruption scandal. Nhlanhla Nene resigned Tuesday after admitting he met 6 times with members of the Gupta business family. The Guptas are accused of working with former President Jacob Zuma to secure government contracts and determine cabinet appointments, something they strongly deny. The resignation is seen as a blow to President Cyril Ramaphosa, since Nene was considered one of his closest allies. Here's Ramaphosa making the announcement.
In the interests of good governance, I have decided to accept his resignation. During his tenure as Minister of Finance, Minister Nene served the people and the government of the Republic of South Africa with diligence and great ability. I have decided to appoint Mr. Tito Mboweni as the Minister of Finance with immediate effect.
Earlier on the program, France 24's Aisha Ismail joined us from Cape Town. She further explained the events that led up to Nene's resignation.
It's interesting to note that Nhlanhla Nene did not commit a crime. He's not been charged with anything, and he did not commit a crime, as President Cyril Ramaphosa had pointed out earlier. What happened was that Nhlanhla Nene appeared before the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, which involves this controversial immigrant Indian family called the Guptas, and the influence that they had on the Zuma government at the time, and members of parliament and members of cabinet members who served under former President Jacob Zuma. So during the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, Nhlanhla Nene was asked about whether he had met with the Guptas and his relationship with the Guptas, and he said that he had met with them, and that he had met with them at their residence and also had meetings at their offices and had tea with them. But after he had given evidence at the Commission of Inquiry, a private television channel called ENCA in South Africa played a clip where they had done an interview with Nhlanhla Nene earlier, and they asked him the question about his relationship with the Guptas, and he gave the impression that he had met with them by chance and that he did not have any meetings with them. And this was clearly, it contradicted the evidence that he gave before the Zondo Commission, where he had said that he had met with them at least 6 times. And of course, that then sparked calls from opposition parties as well as ordinary South Africans for Nhlanhla Nene, the former minister of South Africa's finance minister, to step down and to resign.
So it was the appearance of withholding information. What has the reaction been like in South Africa, both among politicians and within the public?
Well, on the one hand, people are saying that Nhlanhla Nene did the right thing. He did the honorable thing to step down and to resign. On the other hand, people are saying that he had lost credibility and he was forced to step down. Of course, President Cyril Ramaphosa commended him for taking this decision and tendering his resignation. But what's going to be very interesting is to see whether other cabinet ministers who are believed to have had relationships with the Guptas when they appear before the Zondo Commission, whether they will also come out and say that they did meet with the Gupta family and what their relationship with the Gupta family had been over these years, and whether there will also be calls for them to resign, and whether this will lead to Cyril Ramaphosa having to reshuffle his cabinet.
That was France 24's Aisha Ismail. The United Nations and African Union are calling on South Sudan's warring parties to take concrete steps toward implementing last month's peace deal. A joint mission is in the country to promote the agreement, as well as women's participation in government. Nhlanhla Nene has the story.
The AU and UN delegation met with women who walked for 5 days to reach this camp in Bentiu. Many were raped in the region called Unity.
Women are being raped all the time, and you will find that those who are raping women are younger than our own children. Sometimes 5 or 10 men rape one woman.
The delegation came to South Sudan to advocate for a guaranteed minimum of 35% of women in transitional governance roles.
We are convinced that peace will not be made and indeed will not be sustainable if the population of this country, particularly the women, are not part of that process.
Jean-Pierre Lacroix is the head of the UN's peacekeeping operations. It has deployed nearly 15,000 troops in South Sudan, but the situation remains tense. Last month, President Salva Kiir and his rival Riek Machar signed yet another peace deal, but many observers remain skeptical. The two men have signed half a dozen ceasefire agreements since the civil war began in 2013, 2 years after the nation's independence. Moreover, they do not control all the armed groups. According to a recent scientific study, more than 382,000 people have died as a result of the civil war.
The International Olympic Committee has picked its first African host of any Olympic Games. Senegal will host the 2022 Youth Games, beating out bids from 3 other countries. The IOC cited Senegal's booming economy as part of its decision. President Macky Sall says a 50,000-seat Olympic stadium will be built. Here he is speaking after the announcement.
Your decision is unique in the history of the Olympics. It honors our country and our continent. That is why I want to pay tribute to Botswana, Nigeria, and Tunisia, who submitted their candidacy at the same time as Senegal. In fact, it is the whole of Africa, the cradle of humanity because of its history, and the youngest continent because of its demographics, which will welcome the young athletes of the world in 2022.
And staying now with Senegal, it's a country full of young entrepreneurs with ideas, but so far, tech investors have been cautious, especially when it comes to funding startups. Recently, though, there have been signs of a change.
These young Senegalese entrepreneurs have 3 minutes to deliver their pitch. They're taking part in a global competition to win funding to develop their startup ideas. Olivia Ndiaye's business got going less than 2 years ago.
We quickly got all the right people in place, quickly found an incubator to help us to structure the project. But unfortunately, it's more the financial side, the investors, funding, especially in the early stages. That's where you find difficulties.
The relative novelty of tech startups adds to the cautious attitude of investors in a country where financial resources are limited. Swiss investment fund SeedStars has a presence in 80 developing countries, including Senegal and other parts of sub-Saharan Africa.
What's lacking is investment in smaller scale projects for startups that need between around $10,000 to $50,000. The private investor scene doesn't really exist today, or at least it needs a lot of development. That's one of the main things that SeedStars will do, by looking for early stage startups that often have a great need for funding today.
Yet things are getting going at a local level as well. CTIC, a business incubator started in Dakar in 2011, recently organised a regional investors summit. And the Senegalese state has also taken measures to boost entrepreneurship.
For some years now, Senegal has lowered the minimum social capital necessary to start a business from 1 million CFA francs to 100,000 CFA francs. You can have a social capital of 100,000 CFA francs. I think that really facilitates the creation of limited liability companies and their single owner equivalents.
Authorities are also planning to open a digital technology park in 2021 to further galvanise this sector. With these changes to Senegal's business environment, other young investors like Olivia may soon be able to get their business ideas up and running.
That's all for this edition of Eye on Africa, but don't go away. There's more news coming up next here on France 24.